Warren Buffett was talking. He taught us if a rich man becomes rich twice, there must be something wrong.
At 19, he dropped out of university and built a company that hit $150 million revenue in just 4 years.
Philosophy gives you a framework to think about problems on a very deep level. As a startup founder, one of the main competitive advantage, it's about the depth of your thinking. I couldn't find any investors. I was also struggling in finding new customers. People saw it's a scrappy startup from a 19-year-old dropout coming from a different country. We thought, what if we just offer advertisers a performance-based pricing? We took over all the risk.
The result? A $350 million exit at age 25.
ChatGPT, that was kind of the pivotal moment for me to understand that's the clear path to solve the generalization problem. I think the ultimate form of simplicity in the AI era, it's autonomy. You define your goals, talk to the model, and the model should do everything for you. Token is a new currency in the AI era. More and more companies is going to reduce their OPEX and invest more into CapEx. It's not a research problem. I think right now it's more engineering problem. It's just a matter of time.
Meet Shi, CEO of FlashIntel, serial entrepreneur and visionary leader. He's built 3 startups, 1 IPO, 1 unicorn, and 1 $350 million acquisition, raising over $450 million along the way. Growing up between Shanghai and Germany and speaking 6 languages gave him a global lens, one that helped him go from dropping out at 19 to building Avazu into a $150 million ARR company and exiting for $350 million by age 25. Always chasing transformative conversations, he led a company that invested over $2 million for a charity lunch with Warren Buffett and made a 6-figure bid to meet Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff. He has been honored in Forbes Asia's 30 Under 30 and Fortune's 40 Under 40. But his worldview is just as compelling as his business track record. In our conversation, he described how Nietzsche's will to power and Japanese Wabi-Sabi guide his decisions through first principles thinking. Early in his career, he built Avazu into a $150 million ARR company by pioneering a performance-based advertising system that reshaped programmatic marketing. Now at FlashIntel, he's applying the same principles to create autonomous AI sales agents, driven by a belief that the ultimate simplicity is autonomy and that tokens are the new currency in the AI era. His mission is bold: free 10 million jobs by automating repetitive go-to-market and customer experience tasks. Let us get started. Yi, welcome to Founder Coho. Your story fascinates me. You had 3 exits and 1 IPO before most founders even get started. This is incredible. And what is more fascinating is I realize it's not just about startup building, it's also human journey. From your perspective, if someone asks who is Yi Shi, what things you would tell them outside your LinkedIn resume?
Yeah, so first of all, glad to be here. And I would describe myself as a founder and a computer scientist. At the same time, I travel around the world. So I'm also a traveler. And like the companies I built, I always had some convictions in some like first principles in things I believe in. And there are like different philosophies and schools I believe in, like because I grew up in Germany, and there are a lot of German philosophers, and I think like one of my favorite philosophers is Nietzsche. Mm-hmm. So his school is like studying the core human incentive in the will to power, and I think like as a founder, it gives me like a drive to always pursue new things, creating the next generation of product or trying to transform a certain industry.
And I also realized since we chatted last time in April, you already traveled more than 10 countries. That's a lot in just 2 months. I'm curious that through your journey, what is your view about the travel? Like, are you searching something deeper through those travel?
At the current stage, it's more for me to experience different cultures, experience the diversity of different cultures, and see different things, so that the travel itself can give me certain level of or certain new inspirations. So it's more for me about the inspirations and new ideas, and also experience the diversity. Than like it's more about the experience itself than some like some purpose. So more the experience.
So the experience, you get energy by experience more different things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned about you're also very into philosophy. Is that also part of your philosophy?
Yeah, I would say so, because I like German philosophers. I also like the Japanese Wabi-Sabi. It's kind of the Japanese philosophy of like imperfection and loneliness, and also like simplicity. Yeah.
That's very interesting, because many people would think German people are very, very perfection driven. Like they want everything to be perfect. And Japanese, like Wabi-Sabi, is like more in imperfection that leads to some like a beauty format. What is your take about different philosophy and how that shapes your own philosophies and views in the startup building processes?
So I'm trying to find some analogies between the different schools of philosophy with a model from the psychology called like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, so based on that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you like as a human being, you have different drives, you have different incentives, core incentives, different drives. You do things because of like you want to survive, you want to make money, or you do things you want to have some certain level of self-actualization or self-esteem and so on. So you do different things with different incentives. And in the philosophies, you also see different philosophers who like study different directions of ontology. Ontology is basically the term of first principle thinking in the philosophy. And like for me, it's like there are like two philosophers which I like the most. One is the Nietzsche. So what Nietzsche says is like you need to fight for the power, will to power. That's what he says. That's the core like ontology, core human incentive under the Nietzsche school. Another one, it's Locke. It's an Anglo-Saxon, like from UK. And he says that the ultimate human drive, it's about freedom and ownership. You want to like pursue freedom, right? Economic freedom, all kind of freedom, and also ownership. So you fight for things that belong to you. If you fight try to fight for something that doesn't belong to you, you get de-incentivized. So these are the two kind of philosophers or schools which I like the most.
That's very interesting. It looks like you put a lot of thoughts about the meaning of life and the human drive. Do you think that is also related to the roles you need to play as a startup founders, that you need to understand more about human drive?
I would say as a startup founder, it's critical, it's essential to have a deep thinking of the fundamental problems. So you need to think very deep into the problems you're trying to solve, right? So and philosophy gives you kind of a framework to think about problems on a very deep level. So like first principle thinking, it's in philosophy, it's called ontology. So you try to boil things down to the most fundamental, and it's a way taught in philosophy to trying to boil things down, trying to look very deep into certain problems. And as a founder, I think one of the main competitive advantage, it's about the depth of your thinking. So that's why I think that's very important.
Yeah. You mentioned a very great point. A lot of times people think founding a company is about the tactics or like the skills you need. But a lot of times it's also about the decision framework or philosophy. That it might also be more important than the things you do, because there's so many factors you need to think about when you do the startup, like which direction you need to go. So I want you to also rewind back to all the beginning part of the journey of this philosopher and startup building process, your early days. You mentioned about you like the German philosopher, and I also realized you moved from China to Germany in very young ages. Tell us about your early life.
Yeah, so I grew up in Shanghai, stayed in Shanghai for around 10, 11 years. So I was born in Shanghai and went to Germany when I was 11. And then I went to the high school and also to the uni in Germany. So I basically also grew up in Germany. And when I was 19, I left Germany and pursued my first startup. So I became a startup founder, started my first company in Shanghai again. So back to Shanghai. And since then, I've been living in different countries. So like China, Singapore, US, Japan, and I founded 4 companies basically.
That's cool. So in the very early ages, you actually experienced both culture in China and in Germany. So did your whole family move to Germany?
Yes. Yeah. So my family moved to, my parents moved to Germany around 35 years ago.
35 years ago.
Yeah.
And I also realized that you learned programming very young age, like 13 years old.
Yeah.
Tell us what made you get into computer programming?
As a teenager, I was just too boring. I didn't have anything to do. I didn't have any other hobbies. So I spent a lot of time in the library. And in the library at that time, there were a lot of magazines about PC and like how to repair your computer, installing different programs, playing games, and so on. So, and at that time, I thought it would be cool to make a own website. Like my own homepage at the beginning. So I started to learn how HTML works, how FTP works, and how like register domain works. And I started like getting into like web programming, web coding. At the beginning, very basic stuff like JavaScript, HTML, and then more and more into PHP and some more like other programming languages.
That was a very young age to learn computer languages.
Yeah, when I was 12, 13.
12, 13.
Yeah.
Well, most people are still learning their mother language, how to write and read it, now learn how to communicate with computer. Another thing I feel very fascinating is that you also know 6 languages in addition to computer languages. How did you learn all those languages?
Yeah, so in Germany, I grew up in an environment where I needed to learn German and also another like 3rd language in German schools, which was either Latin or French. And then because I grew up in China, in Shanghai, so I also speak Shanghainese because we spoke Shanghainese. I spoke Shanghainese with my parents and also my grandparents. And also I spent some time in Japan, so I also speak a little bit Japanese. Yeah, so that's basically the background.
Knowing 6 languages, how does it change your philosophy of the world?
It gives me like the diversity of thinking about the problem from different perspectives and also different cultures. So if you think about European languages, especially German, the German language is it's designed to be very logical. It's very logical language. So like you have like for the nouns, you have like different articles in different like female, male, or like neutral. So different articles. And then like the grammar is also very logical.
Yeah.
So it's a very logical language. And then you think about English or Chinese. Chinese is not I would say Chinese is not a logical language. It gives you kind of a feeling, if you see a Chinese character, it's kind of like a picture trying to illustrating about something. Yeah. So, and if you think about English, it's English is more compared to like the European languages. I think English is more easier. It's more easier language. So And by understanding or knowing different languages, it gives me like different perspectives to think from different cultures, and and it gives me also the diversity in thinking.
Yeah, you mentioned that actually a very interesting point is about the nature of the language, and that also impacts how people behave. You mentioned about like German language is more precise. You can describe the exact meaning using the different version of the verb and nouns over there. Chinese is like more fluid, and it's more imprecise as a consequence of that. It's also very interesting to see that how this impact like the people's thinking.
Yes.
There's like a spectrum. On the one hand is the computer language is very precise. There's exactly one way to do things or represent the things. On the other hand, music or art is also a language which is very imprecise. And the people who use different language, they will do either very logical, programmatic things, or they will be like more artistic things. That has the impact of like how the people's like behavior look like. For example, I personally found like a person who use a more imprecise languages, they're more imaginative, but it's harder to follow the exact same instructions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious that among your experiences about different culture, now you experience Chinese culture, Japanese culture, German cultures, now the US culture as well. What is your take about different cultures?
I think the Japanese culture and the German culture, it's very similar. So people take a lot of value in like craftsmanship, building things, and responsible or focus on the quality, trying to make the best out of everything. And American and Chinese culture is more programmatic. Mm-hmm. So people try to define a goal and try to like focus on getting things done and try to achieve the goal, basically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the biggest difference for me. But in detail, there are like different ways, like in doing things. If you look into Germans or Japanese or Americans or Chinese, like Chinese tend to be very programmatic and also try to be moved very fast. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's like the quality might not be the best, mm-hmm. but you try to get things done. And you try to ship the product to see how the market reacts and so on. While the German Japanese culture, they try to make like a top quality product first before they launch to the market, bring it to the market. And in the US, there are also different type of cultures, because US is a very, very big country. It's very diverse with different cultures, different people coming from different places. And if you look into Silicon Valley, everyone talking about shipping fast. You need to ship very fast. You need to like iterate on a weekly basis or twice a week. Yeah. While in some like maybe other regions of the US, like the way of thinking, it's a little bit different again. Yeah.
Yeah. You had a lot of great observations about the characteristics of different culture. And over the past like 15 years, I have building multiple companies across different countries. Do you feel like those philosophy helped you to build like multinational teams?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Because I think understanding different cultures is very important in like bringing the vision to the team. And as a CEO, in my opinion, there are two things which gives you the biggest level. The first thing is having the right product vision and understanding the past, the technological past, like how the industry is going to evolve over the next 5 years, 10 years, and trying to build a product roadmap that is that is going to help the company to win over the next like 5 years or 10 years. And the second thing is communicating the vision to the team, because it's a lot of times it's not about building a product yourself. It's about building an A-class team and bring out an A-class or like a top niche product together with that team. So you need to communicate your vision, and you need to talk to the team, and that's very important.
So I wanted to also rewind it back to the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. You mentioned about your first startup at the age of 19, and tell us a little bit more.
So I studied computer science in Germany. I started my study when I was 18. At the age of 19, I was in my third semester, and I was studying in Germany, in Frankfurt, and I was already like making some income with my website at that time, and I was thinking about whether I should make that like full-time, make that business full-time. And I decided to drop out of my study and started my first company, which was Avazu. It was started 2009. I moved from Germany back to Shanghai because I thought I could find more talents in China. So I moved back to Shanghai and started my first company, which was an ad tech company. So we built advertising platforms. At that time, it was like there wasn't so many advertising platforms on the market. Everyone was trying to sell ads on a very manual kind of like workflow. So you go to a customer, sign a contract, then you need to like use Excel sheets to open up an insertion order, and then like try to place your ads of the advertiser onto the web properties. And we wanted to bring everything into one platform, automate everything, and make the transactions more efficient through auctions.
I would imagine as a 19-year-old, it's hard to make people take serious on it. And do you have any challenges on securing customers or finding initial early employees?
Yeah, I think the biggest bottleneck at that time for me was one, finding customers, two, finding investors. So I couldn't find any investors. I was also struggling in finding new customers because people thought like it's a new scrappy startup from like 19 years old dropout coming from a different country. So people took me seriously. And so I was trying to solve that problem with rethinking about the business model. How could we remove all the clutters, remove all the frictions in onboarding new customers, and what could we do to like attract more talents to build a great product? So I think the struggles at that time was also a good thing for me to really think deep about the efficiency. How could we become more productive or more efficient?
What was your business model that helped you to get out of the situation?
So as I said, like we were really struggling in finding new customers. Mm-hmm. And the biggest friction of finding new customers was that customers didn't trust us. They didn't trust us in delivering the performance. They didn't trust us in like giving us budget could bring them certain level of performance.
So the customer here is the
advertisers
who spend money on on ads network.
Yes. So we thought about what if we just offer advertisers a performance-based pricing. So we guarantee the performance, and the advertisers, they pay us only if we deliver the performance, so that they don't need to take any risk. So we were one of the first companies offering like a performance-based pricing.
By doing this model, you took a lot of risk yourself. You just de-risk for your customers, but you took the risk yourself. How do you feel at that moment?
So we wanted to solve the problem with onboarding customers first, and then try to as you said, the second problem is the fulfillment. So once we de-risk our customers, once we helped our customers to de-risk, we took over all the risk. And the way we did fulfillment was, how could we make our algorithms more efficient? And at that time, I think 2012, 2012. So we actually started with machine learning, but at that time, we built very simple models. We built some logistic regressional models, and we also started a contest on Kaggle. So whoever can build the best CTR prediction model. And I think it was one of the first and one of the most participated contests at that time on Kaggle among the machine learning community.
When would you became profitable?
In the second year.
In the second year, that was very fast.
Yeah.
Because
we were also very efficient. We had a really lean team, very small team.
How big was the team?
At that time, around 15 people, 15, 20.
Another thing I found very impressive is that your revenue grew rapidly. I heard about just after a couple of years, your ARR hit 50 million. Is that right?
Yeah, it was my first company.
Company in just a couple of years, right?
I think it took 3 or 4 years.
Oh, 3 and 4 years.
3 or 4 years, yeah.
To hit 50 million ARR.
Yeah.
I think before the vibe coding revenue trend, this is probably the fastest I heard. Yeah. Is there any pivotal moment in the company or pivotal decision you made in the company that you think contribute this rapid growth? If you name one.
I think the biggest pivotal moment was to launch a performance-based pricing, to remove the frictions in the pricing itself, and to enable customers coming onto the platforms through a self-service onboarding instead of having a service team to onboard them.
Yeah, you had a very great quote. It's business model actually is very, very important for the company. If you put it that right, then things get easy. For example, Google, they have the AdWords. That single decision helped them over the 2 decades.
Yes.
So you had incredible success for your first company. How did you find your early team members?
I found them mostly by scouting. So initially, the first team members I found was through direct scouting. So I looked into LinkedIn, trying to find different people from my industry who had an international background. Yeah, and after that, it was mostly through job postings and also referrals.
And most of the team members were based in Shanghai or different country?
At the beginning, it was mostly based in Shanghai, and then we moved. We also opened up an office in Netherlands, also another one in Germany.
So you opened the office
and also one in India. Yeah,
one in India. You became a international company very early on.
Yeah, I think from 2012, 2013.
Wow, that's very early. And where were your customers from? Were they also
They were also international.
Very international.
Yes.
So you're a very international company from the very beginning.
Yeah. It was a very international base of customers.
Was that an intentional choice made by you?
I would say so, but we also found a lot of demand coming from different countries outside of China at that time. Because in China, there was still a lot of incumbent interest with legacy media who didn't want to push for performance-based pricing. It's going to disrupt their business models. So, and outside of China, we could find a lot of customers because they didn't have so many alternatives. And some of them, they just started with advertising. They just started with online stuff. And they saw that's a very efficient model for them.
Yeah, I recall that you are also the very first batch of Chinese companies started to do international businesses back in 2010. It was only later in 2014, 15, Cheetah Mobile started to go more global. And I wonder that from your experiences, what was the pros and the cons of going international as a Chinese company who go international instead of focus on Chinese market back then?
Because I had an international background. So I grew up in Germany. I always thought globally. If you look into European companies, if you just serve a single market, you will never be able to scale because every European market is very small. And every European company, every European startup I know always try to launch in different European countries. So it ends up having office in over 10 countries. Because in Europe, you have different countries with different culture and different languages. You need to localize. So because of that background, I always thought we had to do business globally. Instead of just focus on one country. And
then later you sold the company of 350 million to a Chinese public company, which is incredible. And how old was you when that happened?
25.
Wow, at the age of 25, you become multi-millionaire from that. How does it feel when that happened?
I didn't feel so much difference actually, because my drive was not about the money itself. I was always trying to build a cool product or try to build something which can be transformative in a certain industry. So I didn't felt so much about the exit itself. And also the deal was 40% cash and 60% equity. So I became kind of a major shareholder of the public company. And I continued to manage the business. Yeah, so it wasn't so much difference for me at that time.
What made you decide to exit from that company? And like you mentioned, it's actually a merger for the company.
Yeah, it was more a way for us to get listed in China because it was very hard to get listed directly in China. The IPO system in China, it's registration based. It's approval based, not registration based. So you need to get different government approvals to get to get listed. And at that time, it was almost impossible for us. We did a lot of international business. We didn't do so much in China. So even the audit, we're gonna have a lot of issues with even the financial audit.
That's very interesting. So you did this merge for the IPO. So essentially become like a reverse merge IPO. Was that common back then?
There was 1 year or 2 years where a lot of tech companies in China did very similar transactions. Later, it was less and less actually. Yeah, because it's as I said, the Chinese system, it's a approval-based system. So they need to balance the demand and supply of the capital on the market. So if the ETF, the stock index goes down, less companies get public. If the index goes up, you get more companies listed, whether through direct IPO or whether through acquisitions, M&A.
And you mentioned about your roles also changes after the acquisitions, and you also started to manage the new company. Tell us a little more about the life.
At that time, I was young, and I got my first major exit. On paper, I also made a lot of money, so I thought I should try to pursue the next big thing. So I started two other companies at that time, one in consumer internet, another one in shared mobility. And the crazy thing was also that the headquarters of these two companies were also even in two countries. So one in Singapore, one still in Shanghai, China.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you did something that many founders will think crazy, like doing two companies in parallel in two different countries. What made you decide to do two companies?
I just didn't want to rest. So I was too boring.
A lot of energy.
I had too much energy. I was young.
And then how do you split the time in these two companies?
3 to 4 days in one, another 2 to 3 days in the other company.
You mentioned about one in Shanghai, one in Singapore. So did you need to travel very frequently?
A lot. Yeah, I went to Singapore a lot.
I see. So it's like every week you travel between the two cities.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm also wonder that because will have a team from the both sides, how would you convince them that they will have your full attention, or they will have enough of your commitment, given that you only spend half of your time in each company?
So for the team morale, it's very important that on the one side, you have a vision. You need to have a big vision, and you bring that vision to your team. On the other side, you need to build like the business model or the product the company builds needs to have a purpose. Because whatever you build, right, as a founder, if I start a company, I build a product. And the product or the company itself stands testament of what kind of a person you are as a founder. So if you can build the next generational product, and also as a founder, you bring them this vision of transforming a certain industry, then I think the team morale is also going to be okay. And a lot of people are going to be pumped or excited about building the next generational product, like transforming a certain industry. And the only problem comes if you start to lose the vision and start to pursue some financial targets and just going out and try to replicate or copy some products. And even worse, if you cannot win the game by copying the game, by just copying the products because you lack of all the distribution infrastructure or these distribution powers. So I think if you want to keep up the team morale, it's really important to try to find a product or the vision which can transform, which can be transformative, which can be disruptive, and which people think it's a cool thing to participate in.
Yeah, what I heard you mention about is the power of a strong vision. And your experience actually reminds me of Elon Musk, because Elon Musk also managed many companies like X, formerly Twitter, and Tesla, SpaceX, and the Doge. And he seems like a very energetic person like you are. And also I see a similar pattern. He uses strong visions, make us to be multi-planetary species to keep the whole team motivated from that. It's such a very good strategy. Another thing I'm very curious about is that you bid for a lunch for Warren Buffett during this period of time. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to have a lunch with Mr. Buffett in 2015. And when I did my first exit, so
I'm curious how much did you pay for that lunch?
I didn't pay. It's the company. My company paid around 2.35 million.
Wow,
Yeah.
2 million for a lunch. The most expensive one I have ever heard.
Yeah.
Did you got enough values from? Is it worth it?
Yeah, I think so.
So what questions did you ask to Warren Buffett?
Actually, like most of the time, Warren Buffett was talking. He was talking about he gave us a lot of his wisdoms, and so what I remember from that launch, even till now, like that was already over 10 years ago. One thing which he taught us was never try to over leverage. And the way he said it was, if a rich man becomes rich twice, there must be something wrong. So meaning that if you get rich once, you can. So if you already get rich once, if you don't make any major mistakes, you will always stay rich, right? So if you become rich the second time, you must have made some major mistakes, whether you over leveraged or whether you did something wrong. Yeah. So that was the first thing. The second thing I remember was he taught us, he could give us a very like warm atmosphere. I felt a lot of compassion and empathy from him.
Yeah, from your perspective, what is the most surprising thing about Warren Buffett that you learned through lunch?
The most surprising thing at that time was that he was still using a Nokia.
Wow, 2015 still Nokia?
Yeah, I think he was still using a Nokia, and he wasn't reading emails. He had a assistant who prints out all his emails.
Wow. I bet that back then he didn't buy Apple stock yet. Also, I think this is a period of time you get a lot of more experiences like lunch with Buffett, run 2 companies, and then after several years, you retired from the 2 companies. Tell us more.
So after the COVID, at the end of the COVID, at that time, I was still managing Dossi United. And however, I thought I should build a new company, a new, like, more global company based out of Silicon Valley.
So you actually was also thinking about the next one.
Yeah.
I assume it's a FlashIntel.
FlashIntel. So I did a lot of research in Silicon Valley, what I should do. And there was also an event with GPT-3, 3.5, ChatGPT, the launch of ChatGPT, November 2022, I remember.
What were you doing when you first heard about ChatGPT?
I was chatting a lot with ChatGPT. I saw that it's kind of because I studied computer science and I did machine learning very early on. And if you look into the history of machine learning, deep learning, and all the AI stuff, you basically like did everything, a lot of things manually, like feature engineering, selecting the features, manipulating different features, merging different features.
That was a paradigm, like a decade ago. And you did also a lot of that in the first company.
And and then you move more and more towards automating everything and getting more and more compute, putting more like feed more and more data into the algorithm to get a bigger and bigger model and more powerful model. And generalization itself, it has always been a research topic in computer science. So how could you build a model which generalizes across different use cases? And like Transformer or ChatGPT, that was kind of the pivotal moment for me to understand that that's the clear path to solve the generalization problem.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So in computer science, so when I studied computer science, I also had some some stuff in like algorithms, AI, and so on. And we studied like Kolmogorov complexity and all this stuff. And and that was like really kind of a pivotal moment. And then when you look into the history, like I would say the first pivotal moment was like deep learning, when deep learning became more adopted, like among the.
That was 2012 when you were doing your first study.
Yeah, kind of. But at that time, there wasn't so many people still. Like people still believed in feature engineering.
Right.
They still believed in like machine learning specialists, machine learning algorithm engineers who looked into all kind of features, did like all kind of fancy feature engineering, and then train different models.
A quick note on that. What you said is exactly true. Even the deep learning was already achieved amazing things in 2012. And in many companies, it took much longer for them to remove the old system and use the deep learning. For example, in the Google, it was not until like end of 2019, they started actually moving into using deep learning for the CTR prediction. Yeah. So it took a while for the AI movement to take off. You have been putting a lot of thoughts about how to create a generalized framework to solve many problems. Also, you have so many resources. You have been seeing many industry and had financial freedom. You can choose to do any problem exciting. And you end up choosing to FlashIntel. Tell us a little bit more about your vision here and why you pick to work on that problem.
So I chose to start FlashIntel because like ChatGPT was kind of the pivotal moment. And I thought that the sales and customer experience industry has a very big TAM. So in the US alone, in sales related functions, there are over like 13.9 million people employed. So that's kind of our TAM, right? If you try to build the AI agent, the super agent, helping these people, amplifying their productivity or replacing some part of these people. So that's kind of our TAM. And it's way more than coders. I don't know how many coders there are. Maybe like 2 million, 3 million coders, programmers.
4 million?
4 million, yeah. So it's like 3x more. It's already a very big problem. And the second thing was that industry was not well served in the sense that there were a lot of different softwares in different categories trying to solve a part of the bigger problem, a part of the GTM, the go-to-market problem, whether like pipeline generation, sending out emails, doing calls, like trying to track the pipelines, or the forecasting, and so on.
Maybe one thing that you can describe to our audience is about how is the life of the go-to-market team look like before the AI agent?
So we did some customer surveys at the beginning, and we found that some of the customers, they have over 15 subscriptions to run the go-to-market team.
Like the subscription other SaaS companies.
Exactly. So you get different tools for different use cases, for different channels, highly specialized.
Can you give us some examples of those subscriptions?
Okay, so if you think about sending out emails, right? Sending out emails alone, you need to have data provider. So that's one subscription. And then you need to have what is called email verifier. So you get a list of emails, you need to verify them. Because if you send to all these email addresses from the data provider, a lot of these emails land into spam. So you need to get an email verifier. So that's another one. And then you need to have an email sender, right? A platform which helps you to send out emails. And by sending out emails, you need to have mailboxes, because if you just use your main domain to send out emails, it's going to flag your domain. So you need to register new domains. And then after sending out email, you have a call to action. You want to schedule a meeting. You want to ask someone to register or something like that, right? You have a call to action and you have a landing page, or you want to schedule a meeting, and then you have a meeting router. That's another one.
Yeah, Calendly.
Yeah, Calendly and some others. And then once you schedule the meeting, you need to have because in sales use case, every meeting is valuable. You need to record all these meetings and then run some analysis on these meetings. So that's another one. And then you get a CRM which tracks all the progress of all your prospects. That's another one. So just thinking about sending out emails, you already have 7 subscriptions.
How did FlashIntel help solve this problem?
So initially, we thought it's enough to just build different features into one platform, like offering as a unified platform, until we figured out that's not the right way to do it. And my philosophy, when we started with the discussion at the beginning, like one of my philosophies I believe in, it's Wabi-Sabi. So you believe in imperfection, impermanence, simplicity, and these principles. If you translate these principles onto software products, I think every product, under the circumstances to fulfill the user's needs, right? Every product needs to become more and more simplified. So from difficult to use to simple to use.
It's more human friendly.
More human friendly, or more shorter time to value. Let's say time to value. And the ultimate, what is the ultimate form of simplicity? I think the ultimate form of simplicity in the AI era, it's autonomy. So you define your goals, talk to the model, and the model should do everything for you. You don't need to struggle with all the interface. It's not about user experience anymore, right? It's autonomy. How can you achieve autonomy at the same time, still deliver the outcome your customers want?
Yeah, that's such an interesting perspective. And you touched about such a great point about the human AI interfaces, like the human computer interfaces on that. Like when we are interfacing with computer, the interface we do is programming, is pipeline, is processing, is workflow. It's very specific and defined for certain problems. That actually leads to what I mentioned about there's a particular workflow for a particular situation, then we implement software for that. But with AI, is designed for this generalized solution, so it allows people to build to the ultimate vision, which is, like you mentioned, autonomy. You just talk with the agent, and the agent can do the things autonomously. And I also realized one interesting thing is you work on agent very, very early on, FlashIntel was 2022. Of course, nowadays everyone's talking about agent. And what made you start to think about agent in such early time and so committed on it?
I would say the pursuit to get the product more simplified, try to find the clutters and try to eliminate all the clutters, try to make everything more frictionless.
I really like that your first principle thinking, which you mentioned earlier, and this is such a great example. You are simplify the problem because I heard you talk about you initially do all these integrations. You kind of trying to have the philosophy, I think the mentality initially was it's so complex, so let's do the complex thing for the customer. But later you started reflecting and thinking about what is the first principle here. The users and humans, they don't need complexity. What if there's a simple thing the human just talk to and gets it done? That fits the agent definition so well. And I wonder that as you are pursuing this agent, because you have been doing a couple of years before, so many people are doing it, what is the biggest learning about implementing the AI super agent?
fundamentally, there are two things. One is, how can you identify where are the areas you can, like, where are the frictions? There can be frictions in a lot of different areas. So trying to identify and eliminate as many frictions as possible. That's like the main challenge. It's not, a lot of times it's not easy to create a simplified product, to create a minimalistic product, which can still fulfill all the needs of the customers. And the second thing is more on the commercial side. So if you think about enterprise software, a lot of companies still run a sales motion, right? Sales-led motion. And in the AI era, if everything becomes so simplified, is there going to be is Jevons paradox is going to be more effective than keeping the old playbook of sales-led motion? So so
that's a great point. Like the Jevons paradox. This is such an interesting paradox. It's so relevant to AI as well. It says that when the cost of doing a thing, like what cost of buying a good is lower, it actually increases the consumption, because it unlocks so many new possibilities and potentials from it.
Exactly.
And I like the way you put it here, like the first principle thinking, not just in the product building that leads you to think about doing agent early on, but also how the go-to-market strategy, how the business side is working. Like the sales-led growth, like you mentioned, is another example of processes. The reason why they have so many SaaS tools is because they have the playbook of the sales-led growth. Like they need to book on the meeting, do the call, and close the deal. Whole Salesforce pipeline, like basically whole Salesforce built based on that concept. And now that you're moving to the stage where everything gets simplified, the go-to-market gets simplified, which means that the sales-led growth is going to revolutionize. I'm very curious about, you put so many thoughts on this. Like, what is your solution for that? Like, if sales-led growth no longer exists, what type of growth strategy you will have for FlashIntel?
So ultimately, if everything becomes minimalistic, if the time to value becomes very short, I think the main playbook is going to be heavily based on PLG.
Product-led growth.
Product-led growth, with a minimal level of SLG to serve certain kind of customers.
Yeah, that's a very great point. And the PLG, SLG thing has been a topic for SaaS founders for many years. And there's a traditional wisdoms in the Silicon Valley about the PLG, which is like, you can do a PLG campaign, grow very well until you hit 20 million ARR, and then you have to put a sales team to ignite the growth furthermore. Do you agree with that or not?
I think the beauty with AI is, I mean, compared to traditional SaaS, is you can charge based on performance, you can charge based on consumptions, you can also charge based on outcome, right? So the more the customers use the platform, the more they pay. While in the traditional SaaS model, it's all based on seats. So the customer, they need to hire more people to make more money for you.
I love this conversation, by the way. This is so fascinating. You mentioned another great point about what is the pricing for AI companies, AI models. Traditionally, all SaaS companies are based on these subscription models, like you charge per seat, and then I help you, like one person, I will charge like $20 per month or like $100 per month. And that is based on the part that I automate your workflow that a human is doing manually. I save you time and then charge based on that. But because the AI has so many autonomy, and it is possible to just charge by performance And it tied back to what you mentioned about for your first company. Like the CPC or CPM is actually putting more risk on the customer side, but performance-based pricing putting more risk on the company side. And that put a lot of risk on your side, but then you solve that with AI. Now it looks like you do it again with FlashIntel, now this time with the sales team. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, I think my big conviction on AI, so one is AI is on the verge to solve the generalization problem. So if we want to achieve AGI or ASI, that's a key milestone. The second thing is, I think token is a new currency in the AI era. So consumption of tokens, because at the end, regardless of what model you train, it all comes down to data, compute, and architecture. So architecture is more a research problem. Data, compute, like you buy more GPU, you try to get more data, synthetic or like crawl from the web. And ultimately, the output of all these three pillars, it's a tokens, right?
Can you elaborate more about the three pillars?
Yeah, so I mean, like data, compute, and architecture. So architecture is like transformer. You discover new architectures which can make like AI models more efficient, MOE, and so on. And data, it's like all kind of data you need or you use to train the models. So previously, like we got data from the web, and now like a lot of companies are trying to generate data, synthetic data, to feed to the model. And then like the compute itself, it's like GPU, Moore's law. So you wait for NVIDIA, always the next generational GPU. And like the frontier GPU companies, they always try to get up the productivity per per energy unit, like per watt of their chips. So basically the GPUs are going to be more and more powerful every year, and the cost is going to decrease. So that's why I think like in the AI era, if we believe into AGI is going to come maybe in 5 years, in 10 years. And also if we believe in Jevons paradox, basically you're going to consume more and more tokens. And the token consumption is going to increase exponentially year over year because of the like Jevons paradox. Everything becomes cheaper, right? You get more powerful GPUs, like better architectures, more and more data. And so ultimately it's all about tokens. Because ultimately a lot of the products, existing SaaS products in different industries, is going to be enabled or disrupted by AI, integrating AI or disrupted by the AI. Because the ultimate form of simplicity is autonomy. So AI, especially like AI, generalized AI or AGI, right? Like generalized AI towards AGI, kind of an intermediate form of AI, is able to do a lot of autonomous workflows, agentic workflows. So, and it's going to consume more and more tokens because there's more and more use cases. That's why I believe token is a new currency in AI. Yeah, and the third thing, and the third thing of my thesis is the third point is like more and more companies is going to reduce their OPEX and invest more into CapEx. OPEX meaning that in order to scale, in order to grow, they don't hire more people. They buy more GPUs. They invest into hyperscalers. They invest into data centers. And they use smarter AI models to achieve these growth targets. So less OPEX, more CapEx.
You put it in a good way, token Token is the currency. And by just observing the currency, which is the price, you can know a lot of things happening. For example, when we observe the market, we know the goods that will move into the places where it's cheaper to the more expensive place because people can make more profits from that. And if we think in that way, there's like whole token economy that we can think about and what that would enable. And one trend you mentioned about is like autonomy and how to achieve that autonomy. Usually that means more token consumption. And the trend we have been observing is that when the ChatGPT just come out, it's just like writing assistant and how many tokens you will need for that, very little. And then later, we are starting to do coding. And the coding, you need to like understand way much more code indexes. The token consumption just go higher. And now we're entering the stage where the agent needs to take action. And you also need to understand much broader part of the world. So which it needs to more token consumption. But generally, more token consumption will achieve more autonomy. And when you build a company, it's much better to build for the future because the token cost is going rapidly down and tied back to like charge by performance. Even you're not making money right now, if you're operating in the mode and just give people the autonomy, and get a market, but then eventually when the token cost goes down, you will become insanely profitable when the time is right. And I'm very, very curious about the FlashIntel's ways of use token. And you mentioned about the three pillars as data and how just compute, and that eventually leads to autonomy. How exactly FlashIntel solutions solve that problem? How did you analyze the data you have and turn that into action insights?
So what FlashIntel does is we try to build AI agents, and we look into the common problems or the biggest problems which like the GTM teams are facing and also the customer experience teams are facing. And then we try to like build very agentic workflows to fix these problems. And by doing that, like there's one term called long horizon planning. So having a good planning agent, it's very critical. Like how to solve these problems. It's not it's the agent we are building is not a general agent. It's a very specific agent. So a general agent you might have certain level of hallucinations and that's still okay. Like most of the users don't care because they just pay like $20 or whatever. But if you look into some of the B2B use cases, enterprise use cases, you need to find the balance between autonomy and control, or autonomy and guardrails, because it's in some enterprise use cases you face issues like data security, data safety, brand safety, and so on. So you don't want AI to write some weird messages. So guardrails is also important. And that comes down to how you design the system, balancing like the autonomy with the guardrails or autonomy with the control.
In the FlashIntel, how did you put the guardrails? Like what exactly the guardrail is and how do you ensure that the agent is following what human want them to do?
So on the one side, we also use AI to make a like QA to make an additional check of all the outcomes coming from the AI.
So you have an evaluation system?
Yeah, evaluation system based on AI.
Based on system. Yeah,
mm-hmm. Based on AI as well, based on large language models. And on the other side, we still give our users the opportunity to approve the outcomes coming from AI.
So the users will give some feedbacks.
And we collect the data and try to run some reinforcement learning.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you will collect the real data from users, either so they reply to the systems or do you design some buttons for them to give feedback?
Yeah, we do have some buttons where they approve, where they need to approve certain steps.
Gotcha. And
they can also use like an auto approval, so everything gets auto approved. Or they can also look into the outcomes coming from the AI and try to,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that leads to another question I have. Like, you are basically doing the alignment of humans and the models through the feedback. So the way you put it previously was control, but also it's about alignment. That the agent will basically do the thing based on the what the human's intentions look like. How did you do that? Did you train models? Did you design some framework to make the alignment happen?
So currently we are more at the stage of collecting all the data, and based on the data, we do some reinforcement learning.
So what like, as you are doing the planning about the future of FlashIntel, what are the biggest like challenges you think that both FlashIntel and the whole industry need to solve?
To be honest, I don't see any challenges. It's a very clear path to go. It's just it's just a matter of time. Maybe you can achieve these milestones within 2 years or maybe 3 years. If you think about challenges, you need to break it down to whether it's an engineering problem or whether it's a research problem. So research problem normally is unpredictable. You don't know whether the next cutting edge architecture is going to come out or not, whether it's going to be exponentially better or not compared to the current one in regards of like the loss or different areas of evil and benchmark. And when it comes to an engineering problem, it's more predictable. It's more about time, right? A lot of A/B testing. Whoever brings out the first product, whatever, like the first working prototype or the first working product which can fix exactly that problem. I think right now it's more engineering problem. It's not a research problem. So
we're entering into more like engineering spaces.
Yes.
And
it's more about A/B testing, whoever brings out the first prototype instead of a research problem. It's not a research problem.
Exactly. You actually mentioned about a great point about when is the best time to do a startup in a space. Usually for new technologies, first it comes from the lab and there's a lot of research, and it's actually not a good time to build a startup when that is is happening. It is the transition between the two, like transition between the research problem to engineering problem. That's actually best time to do. And I think that, like you mentioned, actually 2023, it's actually that transition time. So you pick a very good timing.
Yeah, but I mean, you also need certain level of there's always some learning curve involved as well to build the right product, to leverage the technology. It's not just about understanding it's the next big thing and you need to be on the table. It's also about building the right tech stack, building the right product for this industry, and that requires time.
Details.
Exactly.
I see so many successful founders in this AI wave is that they have been serial entrepreneur like you do. They build a company for many times, even like the Manas founders, they did 3 companies before. And then they build all these muscles already. And when the time is right, they can execute extremely fast to get the opportunity from that. So like that skills is also very, very important.
You need to be prepared.
Like the opportunity is only for people who are prepared. I want to switch to another topic about the customer side for the FlashIntel. I saw that you have over 1,000 customers across US, Asia, and Europe. And among all the customers you saw, do you see any patterns on the people who adopt AI sales agent in the early stage?
I see an urgency among all kind of companies to adopt AI. Because I think a lot of companies, they understand that AI is going to disrupt a lot of things. So I see kind of a urgency in a lot of companies in adopting new technologies. But you still need to be the right vendor for them to adopt. So you still need to understand their problems and offer the right solutions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I think we are moving to the closing part of the interview. I'm very curious, like you are a very busy person running many companies before. What are the places you get most of the information? Like, do you have any recommendations for books, podcasts, or
Yeah,
any? Yeah.
so I listen to two podcasts mostly on YouTube. One is Lex Friedman.
Oh yeah, I like Lex Friedman as well.
And the other one is All In Podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much for taking time to sharing with us. And for people who are interested in FlashIntel, either as customers or join you, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
They can. You can find me on LinkedIn, or it's the email under the video.
Okay, awesome. We'll put his email under the video. Thank you very much for taking time to share with the community. It's such a great pleasure to chat.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for watching the full interview. If you got value from this conversation, please like, drop a comment, and subscribe to Founder Coho. We've got more founder insights and deep dive interviews coming your way, so don't miss them. See you in the next one.